The meteor storm hit Colony 7 without warning, turning the purple evening sky into a canvas of burning streaks. Zara Thorne pressed her face against the reinforced window of her workshop, watching the celestial display with a mixture of awe and concern. As the colony's lead engineer, she knew the electromagnetic interference would knock out their shield generators within hours. That's when she saw him, Figure stumbled across the barren landscape beyond the colony's protective walls, his tall frame silhouetted against the meteor fire. Even from this distance, Zara could tell he wasn't human. The way he moved, fluid despite his obvious exhaustion, the faint shimmer that seemed to emanate from his skin, marked him as one of the Celestines. Her breath caught in her throat. What was a Celestine doing outside the colony walls during a meteor storm? And why wasn't he seeking shelter in the diplomatic quarter where his people were housed? As she watched, the figure collapsed to his knees, one hand pressed against his side. Dark liquid seeped between his fingers, visible even through the swirling dust kicked up by the meteor impacts. He was injured badly. Zara's hands moved to the emergency beacon on her workbench, then stopped. 3 months ago, she might have called security without hesitation. But 3 months ago, she hadn't been stripped of her clearance and relocated to this isolated workshop on the colony's edge. 3 months ago, she hadn't spoken out against the alien registration protocols that treated Celestine refugees like potential threats. Now she was as much an outcast as the wounded being beyond the walls. The Celestine tried to stand, but fell forward into the red dust. Meteor fragments continued to rain down around him, some no bigger than pebbles, others the size of her fist. One direct hit would kill him instantly. Zara grabbed her emergency suit from the wall hook and began pulling it on with practiced efficiency. Her movements were quick but precise, born from years of emergency drills. The suit's heads-up display flickered to life, showing atmospheric readings and trajectory predictions for the incoming debris. She sealed her helmet and activated the airlock. The outer door slid open with a mechanical whine barely audible over the storm's roar. Heat washed over her, even through the suit's climate control as she stepped onto the colony's outer platform. The Celestine was maybe 50 meters away, but it felt like kilometers as she navigated between the falling debris. Her suit's proximity? Alarms chimed constantly, warning her of incoming impacts. She dodged left as a meteor the size of her head cratered the ground where she'd been standing. When she reached him, she could see why he'd been cast out. Celestines were known for their luminescent skin that pulsed gently with their heartbeat. But his was dim, flickering like a dying light. Worse, she could see the ritual scarring on his exposed arms, the mark of a healer who had broken the sacred law against treating other species. "Can you hear me?" she asked, activating her suit's external speakers. His eyes opened, revealing irises that shifted between silver and deep blue. Even in his weakened state, they were beautiful. He tried to speak, but his voice was lost in the storm's fury. Zara didn't hesitate. She activated her suit's emergency stretcher function, and metallic arms extended from her backpack to cradle his body. The servos whined under his weight. Celestines were deceptively solid, despite their ethereal appearance, but held firm. The journey back to the colony felt endless. Twice she had to drop flat as larger meteors screamed overhead. The stretchers, stabilizers keeping her passengers secure. Her oxygen readings dropped into the yellow zone, then orange. Her legs burned with exhaustion, but she pressed on. Finally, she reached her workshop's emergency airlock. The outer door sealed behind them, with a satisfying thunk, cutting off the storm's rage. As the chamber cycled through its decontamination sequence, Zara allowed herself a moment to truly look at the being she'd rescued. Even unconscious and injured, he was striking. His skin held traces of bioluminescence, creating patterns that seemed to shift and flow across his features. His hair was long and silver-white, now matted with blood and dust. Most remarkably, despite his obvious pain, his face held a serenity that spoke of inner peace. The airlock completed its cycle, and Zara carefully transported him into her workshop. She cleared her main workbench with a sweep of her arm, sending tools and components clattering to the floor. Gently, she transferred him from the stretcher to the flat surface. His wound was worse than she'd thought. Something had torn through his side, leaving a gash that wept luminescent fluid instead of red blood. She'd never treated a Celestine before, but basic first aid was universal. "Stay with me," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if he could hear her. "You're safe now." As she worked to clean and dress his wound, Zara couldn't help but wonder what had brought them both to this moment. Two outcasts, abandoned by their own people, finding each other in the fury of a cosmic storm. If that wasn't fate, she didn't know what was. Outside, the meteors continued to fall, but inside her workshop, something new was beginning, something that would change both their lives forever. Kes Valdoran awakened to unfamiliar sounds and scents. Instead of the sterile atmosphere of Celestine healing chambers, he detected the warm aroma of human coffee and the subtle hum of mechanical devices. Soft light filtered through his closed eyelids, gentler than the harsh illumination his people preferred. Memory returned gradually. The exile. The sentence pronounced by Elder Nyx for the crime of healing human refugees. The desperate flight from the Celestine Quarter as enforcement officers pursued him. Then the storm, the pain, the darkness, and her. The human woman who had risked everything to save him. He opened his eyes slowly, his luminescent skin pulsing weakly as his body fought to repair itself. The human sat nearby, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders as she bent over some kind of technical manual. She wore simple work clothes that bore the stains of honest labor, so different from the elaborate robes of his people. "You're awake," she said without looking up, as if she possessed some sixth sense. When she finally met his gaze, he saw kindness in her brown eyes, but also a wariness born of experience. "I'm Zara Thorn. Kes," he managed, his voice rough from disuse. "Kes Valdoran, you've saved my life." The words felt inadequate for what she had done. Among his people, such an act would create a life debt that bound them across generations. "You were dying in a meteor storm. Anyone would have done the same." But even as she said it, they both knew it wasn't true. Most humans feared Celestines, saw them as alien and unknowable. Most would have looked away. Kes tried to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing wound. Zara was beside him instantly, her hands gentle, but firm as she helped him into a more comfortable position. Her touch sent an unexpected warmth through his body, different from his people's clinical healing methods. "Your injury is healing well," she said, checking the bandages she'd applied. "Though I have to admit, I wasn't sure human first aid would work on Celestine physiology." "You did more than you know," Kes replied. "Our healing abilities work better when we feel safe, cared for." He met her eyes. "You gave me that." A flush crept up her neck at his words. To cover her reaction, she moved to a small food preparation area. "Are you hungry?" "I'm not sure what Celestines eat, but I have some protein bars and fruit." "We consume similar foods to humans," he said, watching her move with an engineer's precise efficiency, "though we prefer plants to processed nutrition." He paused. "May I ask why you helped me? Your people and mine?" "The relationship is complicated." Zara's hands stilled on the fruit she was preparing. "Because it was right," she said simply. "Because I know what it's like to be cast out by your own people for doing what you believe in." Something in her tone made his luminescence pulse brighter. "You were exiled too?" She turned, offering him a plate of sliced fruit. "Not officially. But when the colony implemented the alien registration protocols, I spoke against them. Said they were dehumanizing, that they treated refugees like criminals." Her laugh held no humor. "Apparently that made me a security risk. They couldn't fire me outright. I know too much about the colony's infrastructure. But they found other ways to make their displeasure known." Kes accepted the food gratefully, noting how she'd arranged it artfully on the plate. Even in this simple gesture, she showed consideration for beauty alongside function. "What did you do before?" "I was lead engineer for the colony's primary systems. Climate control, power distribution, life support. Now I'm relegated to maintaining the peripheral workshops." She gestured around the space. "It's honest work, but it's exiled by another name." "And why were you exiled?" she asked quietly. Was silent for a long moment. the fruit forgotten in his hands. Was a healer among my people. The most sacred calling in Celestine society, but our laws forbid us from using our abilities on other species. His skin dimmed with remembered shame. When human refugees began arriving, injured and suffering, I could not simply watch them die. You saved them, Zara said. It wasn't a question. I tried. Some lived because of my intervention. But Elder Nyx discovered my actions. She declared me corrupted by alien influence and ordered my abilities stripped away. And Zara could see faint scars across his palms where the ritual scarring had been performed. I am no longer considered Celestine by my people. Without thinking, Zara reached out and gently touched one of his scarred palms. The contact sent a jolt through both of them, not painful but intensely intimate. Kess's skin flared brighter, and Zara felt a strange warmth spread up her arm. I can still heal, he whispered, wonder in his voice. The connection, it still exists. They stared at each other, hands still touching, both feeling something profound shift between them. Zara was the first to pull away, her cheeks flushed. I should let you rest, she said, but she didn't move far from his side. Zara, Kess said softly, thank you. Not just for saving my life, but for helping me remember who I am beyond my exile. She smiled then, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. We outcasts have to stick together, right? As night settled over the colony, they talked quietly about their lives before exile. It's their hopes for an uncertain future, and the growing connection neither could deny. Outside, the meteor storm had passed, leaving the sky clear and filled with stars. But inside Zara's workshop, a different kind of celestial event was taking place to hearts. Separated by species but united by circumstance, beginning to find their way to each other. 3 days had passed since Zara rescued Kess, and their careful routine had settled into something that felt dangerously close to domestic bliss. Each morning, she would wake to find small repairs around the workshop completed with impossible precision, Kess's way of contributing while his body continued to heal. Each evening, they would share meals and conversation, their initial wariness giving way to genuine affection. But their sanctuary couldn't last forever. Zara was reviewing power distribution charts when the proximity alarm chimed. She looked up from her workstation to see Kess tense, his luminescence dimming instinctively. They both knew what this meant. Someone was approaching the workshop. Storage compartment, Zara whispered, pointing to a large panel on the floor. Now, Kess moved with surprising grace for someone still recovering, folding himself into the hidden space beneath her equipment. Zara sealed the compartment just as heavy footsteps echoed on the workshop's metal stairs. The door chimed. The security chief was a mountain of a man, his dark skin marked with service scars, his eyes sharp with intelligence and something else concern. Engineer Thorne, he said formally, then glanced around the workshop. We need to talk. Chief Webb, Zara replied, keeping her voice steady. What can I do for you? Instead of answering immediately, Marcus walked to her workbench and casually placed a small device next to her tools. A scanner jammer, highly illegal for civilians to possess. Zara's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. Interesting energy readings coming from this sector, Marcus said conversationally, his voice pitched low. Electromagnetic anomalies that don't match standard human technology? Beneath the floor, Kess would be able to hear every word. No. Prayed he would remain hidden, regardless of what happened next. Could be interference from the meteor storm, she suggested. A lot of exotic particles in the atmosphere after an event like that. Marcus nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. He smiled, the expression transforming his stern features. Miss Thorne, I've been security chief on this colony for 8 years. I know when someone is harboring a fugitive. Zara's blood turned to ice, but before she could respond, Marcus continued. I also know when someone is doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. Or maybe the right thing for all the right reasons. He leaned against her workbench, his posture relaxed despite the weight of his words. 3 days ago, we lost contact with a Celestine exile during the meteor storm. Elder Nyx has been pressuring Captain Reeves to authorize a full search. I don't know anything about that, Zara said carefully. Of course not, Marcus agreed. But hypothetically, If such an individual were to be found by, say, a compassionate engineer, that person might face some difficult choices in the near future. He picked up one of her tools, examining it with apparent interest. Captain Reeves has scheduled a sector-by-sector inspection for tomorrow morning. Very thorough, the kind that turns over every bolt and circuit board. Zara felt the world tilt around her. Tomorrow? Unless, of course, certain individuals were to relocate before then, hypothetically speaking. Marcus set down the tool and met her eyes directly. There are maintenance tunnels that connect to the old mining complex about 10 kilometers north. Abandoned but structurally sound. It's the kind of place where someone might wait out unwanted attention. Why are you telling me this? Zara whispered. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his scarred hands clasped behind his back. Because 6 months ago you stood up in a colony meeting and said that treating refugees like criminals was beneath us as humans. Because you were willing to sacrifice your career for principle. He paused. Because I have a daughter who asks me every night if the monsters are real. I want to tell her that sometimes the monsters are just people who are different, that the real monsters are the ones who turn away from suffering. The implications of what he was saying struck Zara like a physical blow, about Kess. I know that someone's medical scanner readings have been very interesting lately, Marcus said diplomatically. I also know that, in about 6 hours, my patrol schedule will take me to the eastern perimeter for a 2-hour equipment check. Long enough for someone to hypothetically move through the maintenance sectors without being observed. He retrieved his jamming device and headed for the door. Oh, and Miss Thorne, is that energy signature I mentioned? As of tomorrow, it will mysteriously disappear from our records. Equipment malfunction. Happens all the time. After he left, Zara waited a full 5 minutes before opening the floor compartment. Kess emerged, his skin pulsing with agitation. We have to leave, he said simply. No. Zara was already moving, grabbing essential supplies and stuffing them into a field pack. But Kess, what he's doing, could lose everything if we're caught. Caught her hands, stilling her frantic packing. As could you. As did I when I chose to heal humans. His silver blue eyes held hers. Sometimes the risk is worth taking. As if to emphasize his words, he leaned forward and gently pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, tentative, but filled with all the emotion they'd been carefully dancing around for 3 days. When they separated, Zara's breath came in short gasps. Double quotes Kess, ... I know this complicates everything, he said softly, but I needed you to know. Before we face whatever comes next, I needed you to know how I feel. Zara looked into his luminous eyes and saw her own feelings reflected there. Fear, hope, and something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to name. We'll face it together, she said, sealing her pack. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. As they prepared to leave the safety of her workshop, both knew they were crossing a line from which there would be no return. They were no longer just two outcasts seeking shelter from their respective storms. They were partners bound by choice, in growing love, about to step into an uncertain future together. The maintenance tunnels awaited. And with them, the next chapter of their impossible story. The abandoned mining complex felt like a tomb carved from cold stone and rusted metal. Zara and Kess had been hiding in its depths for 2 weeks. Living off emergency rations in the geothermal springs that still provided warmth in the deeper chambers during the day, they maintained strict silence, knowing that search drones still patrolled the surface. During the night, they allowed themselves to speak in whispers, their voices echoing off the cavern walls. It was during one of these quiet conversations that they stumbled upon something that would change everything. There's something wrong with these excavation reports, Zara said. Reviewing data files she'd downloaded from the colony's archives before their escape, her engineering background made inconsistencies obvious. According to the official records, this mine was depleted 15 years ago. But look at these geological surveys. Kess leaned closer, his natural luminescence providing soft light to read by. In the weeks they'd spent together, their physical intimacy had grown alongside their emotional connection. How they moved around. Each other with unconscious familiarity, his hand resting naturally on her shoulder as he studied the data. I don't understand human mining techniques, he admitted. But these numbers suggest substantial rare mineral deposits still remain. Exactly, Zara said, highlighting sections of the report, specifically trilithium and quantum resonance crystals. The kind of materials needed for faster-than-light communication and advanced weapon systems. A chill ran down Kess's spine that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. Zara, those materials are heavily regulated by both human and Celestine governments. The treaties after the border wars specifically limited their extraction. She nodded grimly. Which means if someone were mining them illegally, they'd need to hide the operation. What better cover than a depleted mine that officially doesn't exist anymore? They've spent the rest of the night piecing together the conspiracy, cross-referencing energy consumption patterns, shipping manifests, and personnel records, painted a disturbing picture. Captain Reeves wasn't just administering Colony 7, he was running an illegal mining operation that violated multiple interspecies treaties. That's why they're so paranoid about security, Zara realized. Why they implemented the alien registration protocols and started treating refugees like threats. They're afraid someone will discover what they're really doing here, as his skin flared brighter as anger coursed through him. And Elder Nix, ... she must know. The Celestine quarters placement gives them perfect oversight of the mining complex. She's not just enforcing racial purity laws. She's protecting their illegal operation by removing anyone who might expose it. The implications hit them both simultaneously. Their individual exiles hadn't been about ideology or law, they'd been about eliminating potential witnesses to a crime that could spark another interspecies war. We have to expose this, Zara said. But even as she spoke, the challenges seemed insurmountable. But how? We're fugitives. Even if we could get this information out, who would believe us? Ash took her hands in his, feeling the familiar warmth that flowed between them whenever they touched. Over the weeks, he discovered that his healing abilities were stronger when he was emotionally connected to someone. With Zara, that connection had grown into something neither of them had expected to find. There is a way, he said slowly, but it would require us to return to the colony. To face them directly. That's suicide, Zara protested. At the moment. We show our faces, not if we do it publicly, Kess interrupted. The quarterly trade conference is next week. Representatives from a dozen colonies, both human and Celestine. If we could present this evidence there, Zara stared at him, seeing the determination in his luminous eyes. They'd have to investigate. Too many witnesses to cover it up. Yes, but Zara... He cupped her face gently. If we do this, there's no going back. Even if we succeed, even if we expose the conspiracy, we'll still be exiles. We'll have each other, but we may never be accepted by either of our peoples again. She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. Are you asking if... I'm sure about us. About this. I'm asking if you're prepared for a future where it's just us against the universe, he said softly. Instead of answering with words, Zara kissed him with a passion that spoke of absolute certainty. When they separated, her eyes blazed with determination that matched his own. Then let's give the universe something to remember, she said. They spent the next 3 days preparing. Zara used her engineering skills to create hidden data storage devices while Kess practiced techniques to mask his Celestine energy signature. They planned their infiltration route, identified key witnesses to approach, and prepared for every contingency they could think of. On the night before the conference, they made love with desperate tenderness, knowing it might be their last peaceful moment together. Afterward, as they lay entwined in their makeshift bed, Zara traced the patterns of light that played across Kess's skin. Whatever happens tomorrow, she whispered, I want you to know that these weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Kess pulled her closer, his heart aching with the depth of his love for this brave, brilliant woman who had risked everything for him. And mine, he said simply. Whatever we were before, whoever we were to our people, what we found together, is worth any price. As dawn approached, they prepared to leave their sanctuary and return to face the forces that had cast them out. But they were no longer the same people who had fled into the darkness 2 weeks ago. They were united now, bound by love and purpose, ready to fight for truth regardless of the cost. The most dangerous part of their journey was about to begin. The quarterly trade conference buzzed with activity as representatives from across the sector gathered in Colony 7's main assembly hall. Zara and Kes watched from the service corridors, their hearts pounding as they observed the crowd through. Maintenance gratings. Human traders in business attire mingled with robed Celestine diplomats, while security officers maintained careful watch over the proceedings. There, Kes whispered, pointing to a distinguished Celestine woman near the central platform, Ambassador Lyria of the High Council. She was my mentor before. If anyone will listen to us, it's her. Zara nodded, checking the data storage device one final time. And there's Commissioner Vale from the Human Colonial Authority. I worked on infrastructure projects for him years ago. He'll remember me. There. Plan was simple, but dangerous. During the afternoon session, when Captain Reeves would be presenting his colony's exemplary cooperation with Celestine neighbors, they would emerge from hiding and present their evidence to the assembled delegates, in front of dozens of witnesses, including media representatives. The conspiracy would be impossible to suppress. But first, they had to survive long enough to reach the platform. Security sweep incoming, Zara murmured, pulling Kes deeper into the shadows as guards passed their hiding spot. Even now, with discovery meaning certain imprisonment or worse, she felt calmer with him beside her. His presence had become her anchor, the steady point around which her world revolved. Kes squeezed her hand, feeling the familiar pulse of warmth that connected them. Whatever happens in there, I want you to know that loving you has been the greatest honor of my life. Don't talk like that, Zara whispered fiercely. We're going to get through this. We're going to expose them, and then we're going to find somewhere we can be together without hiding. He smiled at her optimism, even as his enhanced senses detected the approach of more security personnel. Always the engineer, solving impossible problems with determination and hope. And you're always the healer, she replied. Finding ways to mend what's broken, even when others say it can't be fixed. The afternoon session began with Captain Reeves taking the platform, his confident voice filling the assembly hall. He spoke of successful integration programs and peaceful cooperation, each lie making Zara's anger burn brighter. Citizens and honored guests, Reeves concluded. Colony 7 stands as proof that humans and Celestines can work together toward a prosperous future. That was their cue. Zara and Kes emerged from the service corridor simultaneously, moving with practiced coordination toward the platform. Gasps rippled through the crowd as delegates recognized the fugitive Celestine and the disgraced engineer. Security, Captain Reeves shouted, but Ambassador Lyria's voice cut across his command. Wait, the Celestine diplomat said, rising from her seat. Healer Valdoran, you were declared dead in the meteor storm. How is it you stand before us now? Kes stepped forward, his natural luminescence brightening as he drew strength from Zara's presence beside him. Because Engineer Thorne saved my life, Ambassador. And in doing so, we discovered why both of us were truly cast out. Before security could reach them, Zara activated her data storage device, projecting mining reports and financial records onto the hall's main display screens. The evidence was undeniable: shipping manifests for restricted materials, geological surveys showing vast untapped resources, energy consumption patterns that revealed extensive underground operations. This is fabricated, Reeves protested, but Commissioner Vale was already studying the data with growing alarm. These are official colonial records, the commissioner said slowly. If they're accurate, this represents violations of 17 interspecies treaties and unlawful extraction of restricted materials. Elder Nyx rose from the Celestine delegation, her ceremonial robes rustling with indignation. These criminals seek to destroy the peace between our peoples with lies and deception. And explain this, Kes said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall as he projected additional files. Communication logs between your office and Captain Reeves, coordinating security measures to protect the mining operation. Payment records showing Celestine officials receiving compensation for maintaining silence. The evidence was overwhelming. As delegates absorbed the scope of the conspiracy, security officers found themselves caught between conflicting orders from their compromised leadership and the growing demands for investigation from legitimate authorities. Enough. Captain Reeves drew his sidearm, aiming it at Zara and Kess. These fugitives will not destroy everything we've built here. But before he could fire, Marcus Webb stepped between the weapon and its targets. Sir, I can't let you do this. Not with this many witnesses? Stand aside, Chief, Reeves snarled. That's an order. No, sir, Marcus replied calmly. My oath is to protect the innocent. These people are heroes. The standoff stretched for endless seconds. Then Ambassador Lyria spoke, her voice carrying the authority of her office. By the power vested in me by the High Council, I place this colony under diplomatic investigation. All security forces will stand down immediately. Commissioner Vale nodded agreement. The Human Colonial Authority concurs. Captain Reeves, you are relieved of command pending investigation. As additional security forces, ones loyal to legitimate authority, rather than the conspiracy, move to arrest the conspirators. Zara and Kess found themselves surrounded by a different kind of crowd. Delegates, media representatives, and honest. Colony officials pressed forward with questions and congratulations, but they only had eyes for each other. We did it, Zara breathed, hardly believing they had survived. We did, Kess agreed, pulling her into his arms as his luminescence flared with joy and relief. Their kiss was witnessed by representatives of a dozen worlds, broadcast across the sector and recorded for history. A human woman and a Celestine. Man, outcasts, who had found love in the darkness, now stood together in the light as heroes who had prevented another war between their peoples. Ambassador. Lyria approached them as the crowd began to disperse. Healer Valdoran, the High Council, has reviewed your actions today. Your exile is hereby rescinded, and your status as a healer is restored. Commissioner Vale nodded to Zara. Engineer Thorne, the Colonial Authority would be honored to offer you a position heading our interspecies cooperation program. Zara and Kess exchanged glances, then smiled. Thank you both, Zara said, but I think we'll make our own way, together. Nodded agreement. There are other colonies, other places where an engineer and a healer might do good work, places where love matters more than politics. As they walked from the assembly hall, hand in hand, the future stretched before them bright. With possibility, they had faced exile, conspiracy, and the prejudices of both their peoples. But love had proven stronger than fear, truth had conquered deception, and hope had triumphed over despair. Behind them, Colony 7 began the work of rebuilding trust between species. Ahead of them lay adventures yet undreamed, challenges yet unmet, and a love that would endure across the stars. They were outcasts no more. They were pioneers of a better future, united in purpose, and bound by a love that transcended the boundaries of species, politics, and worlds. The story of Zara and Kess had become legend, proving that sometimes the greatest victories come not from armies or governments, but from two hearts brave enough to choose love over fear, truth over comfort, and each other over the approval of a universe that had tried to keep them apart. Their love had indeed conquered all.